This is Big Business with Sarah. This podcast guides you to finding what you desire most in life and business, because running a business is very much about your personal development. In this podcast, I'm sharing what my clients ask me and how I help them. Thanks for joining. Welcome to the podcast, and today I'm actually very nervous for this episode. I'm sharing how my diagnosis of CPTSD, I'm going to talk more about that later, has really actually helped me evolve in my business more actually than I expected or actually hoped for. So a little bit of background, I've been sitting on a post which I created today, actually yesterday, and I wanted to create a podcast as well. So I'm releasing this on the day after, on the Thursday, 21st September. So, if you're listening to this and you're curious to the post as well, you can go back to 20th of September, scroll back. And I actually wanted to take more time and this opportunity to talk a little bit more about it, because obviously, when you're doing an Instagram, in my case, carousel post, you only have 10 slides, and it needs to be, a certain font so that people can read it. And there is so much more to say about this, actually. So that's why I created this episode. Normally, my podcast episodes are about client questions. It's not like people would come to me and say, "Hey, Sarah, how do you handle this?" But I recently had a request from somebody who is actually diagnosed with the same, CPTSD, complex trauma, I always call it. So, and she has the same diagnosis, and she asked me, if she should step into one of my programs. And, I am not a psychologist. I am a business coach. I do understand psychology. I did learn a lot. I'm still following a coaching education where I'm learning a lot about, how the mind works and everything, and, our nervous system. But I am not a psychotherapist or a psychologist. So this is mostly my personal experience. So I told her from my personal experience if she should join, yes or no. And, and then it's her responsibility to ask maybe others, maybe her therapist or, whomever, and I suggest that, to actually, decide for herself if she wants that. So right when I started my business, so my coaching business, so I've been in business, for about 15 years, professional career / business, started my first business in 2009. So 14 years ago. And, but now I started my fifth business in March 2022. And actually right when I started, so in May, 2 months later, I was diagnosed with complex trauma. And so I wanted to create this post, I actually wanted to create it immediately, right? Because I wanted to tell people that this was my diagnosis. But now I felt like it's the right time to do so. So a little bit of context. Complex post-traumatic stress disorder, that's what CPTSD stands for, is a condition where you experience some of the symptoms of PTSD. So this is the condition where, for instance, soldiers, when they come back from a war, when they hear a big loud bang or fireworks or whatever, it reminds them of, the battlefield, and, they are afraid, and, or anything, maybe they freeze, flight. It's just, I don't know a lot about that, but that's what PTSD is. And this is often what people think trauma is, that it's just one event or maybe 2 or 3 events. And then the other symptoms are, and there is much more, right? But just to name 3, that you have difficulty controlling your emotions, feeling very angry or distrustful towards the world. So that you think like it's me against the world, and or constant feelings of emptiness or hopelessness. And if you want to know more about this, you can find more on mind.org/UK. I think that website, if you're speaking in English, because obviously there's also Dutch sites about this, but I thought this was a very good website, actually, and very, very clear on what it is. And so actually there were many signs in my life before being diagnosed, right? And that's also the typical thing about the condition, is that it's actually very difficult finding out exactly what it is, because it is actually very complex. I think, and there's not one event that made it happen, that you have this. It is actually a constant of things that happened in a certain period of time. In my case, it was in my childhood. I'm not going to talk too much about that, because that's another conversation, which I share, with my friends, with just a few close friends. But I want to share this with you and also to show you that this is a possible diagnosis. Because if I had known this, right? So if I had known that, honestly, I was, controlling my emotions, sometimes I would just get really angry and out of nowhere. And this would happen 4 times a year or something like that. And I had no idea what happened, actually. And I didn't want that anymore, because it was annoying, Most of the time my husband was, the victim there, including myself, by the way. But sometimes it was also friends. And I thought, this is not something that I can live with anymore. And I already got a signal, or like an idea that I should change this. So I went to a dietitian it's actually 2 years ago now. That I'm someone who is a yo-yo, always has, with her weight, I would gain 10 kilos and then I would lose 10 kilos and then I would gain 15 kilos and then lose 15 and then gain 20. Well, so that's a little bit, my story. And I told her that I don't want that anymore. I don't want these up and downs anymore. So, and she was a great person. For people listening, she works at actually a franchise called Dieet Planeet. I think it's only in Amsterdam, not really sure. But she was great. And, if you want to know, I can give you her name, because, she's really good. And message me. And so, we talked and everything. And then actually at some point she said, yeah, I'm sorry, I can't really help you. I think you have to go to a psychologist. Because now we're getting too deep. And I was like, okay, well, maybe you're right, actually. And I agreed with her, obviously, because, when we would go very deep on, why is it that you would, have these relationships towards food, it was always kind of coming down to that, right? So if there's someone, with an eating disorder, it's always mental health. So, and then I had so this was October last year, and then 2 years ago, and then I went to the doctor, my GP, after I had a fight with a friend, because I didn't want that anymore. And I told the doctor, exactly what happened during the fight. And then he immediately actually sent me to a psychotherapist, and I was placed on the wait list for 5 months, because in the Netherlands, you always have to wait for mental health care. This is a big problem, not really a topic for today, but yeah, it's quite annoying, when you know a little bit what your diagnosis is, because, GP doesn't really exactly know what's happening. And I saw the letter, the letter that he wrote to the psychotherapist, and I thought, oh, well, maybe this is me. So anyway, in May 2022, I started therapy, and I got the diagnosis officially. And then actually already everything made sense to me, and I did what everyone else did, right? So I looked everything up. I was reading books, articles about, my complex trauma, and I finally felt like there was actually nothing wrong with me, but there is a reason why I'm feeling this way. So this was something that and when I'm saying this, I'm actually getting a little bit emotional, because I always thought that, yeah, there was actually something wrong with me. And how do I explain this the right way? So, if you're feeling that way, whatever it is, maybe you don't have complex trauma, maybe you have something else, right? It doesn't really matter what you have. But if you're feeling a bit lonely in your feelings or thoughts or maybe even views of the world, really talk about it. And I know that everybody is saying this, but I'm saying it again. And, for me, talking about it is very difficult. So, one of the symptoms is, having trouble with your feelings, expressing your feelings the right way. For instance, in the case of me, like I would get angry or I would just numb, I wouldn't respond. That's actually what I did most of the time. And so I was kind of conditioned to respond a certain way to certain situations. So I was always happy. I wasn't, but I was pretending to be happy, always. Because I knew that if I would do that, I would get praise, people would love me, life would be easier. And it is easier. And, in the short term, but in the long term, of course, it bites you in the tail. What happened to me? So anyway, the process started. I started my therapy in May 2022. I went once a week. And actually, so the therapy was kind of a build-up from recognizing the problem. One, that was a big one, feeling into it. And this was, of course, very difficult, all of a sudden being open to feelings because I shut that down, right? So I didn't want to feel anymore because I was hurt when I showed my feelings. That's the thing. And also feeling safe with feeling feelings, if you get what I mean. Recognize and cope with triggers. So what kind of feedback triggers me? If I would just go to my therapist, for instance, and sometimes there would be sessions where there would have been a situation in my business, and my therapist asks, how are you doing? And then I'm saying, yeah, actually this happened, and I really didn't like the feeling that I got from that. For instance, if somebody was giving me certain kind of feedback, which I did not ask for, and then I said, yeah, but actually I really don't like that. And also already saying that, right? So that was already a big step for me because I would probably feel it or like very deep down, and I would kind of, kind of holding on to it and feeling, holding a grudge. And so, and then we would talk about it, or we would do, he would do some focused therapy. I'm not going to dive too deep into what he did exactly because this was my situation. And, if you're going to your therapist, they're going to do something different with you, obviously, because we're not the same. We're equal, but we're not the same. I had to say this in one of my, well, no, I'm not going to get into that. I love that. We're equal, but we're not the same. So anyway, meanwhile, when I just started coaching, which was March 2022, so that was 2 months before I got the official diagnosis, I was actually having a calendar with a maximum of working maximum 6 hours a day. Normally I would work 8 hours, and so 6 hours a day, 5 days a week. And because I had worked 60 hours a week the year before that, and I was actually exhausted, and I needed to avoid my second burnout. So I had a burnout when I was, I think, about 31 or something. I'm not really sure my age, but I'm 37 right now. So I kind of recognized this, and I really didn't want this, especially not in my business. And but maybe a little bit, without knowing exactly what would happen, in 2022, to make space for my therapy. So kind of also have this mind or headspace in my therapy. So now I'm going to talk about, what was the influence on my business, right? So a little bit the conditions right now. So I was diagnosed. I didn't work a lot of hours. And then the other thing was so I had made a lot of free time for myself. And actually my coaching business started to kick off with 3 clients at first. And then, it started growing, right? It was very soon it were 10 and but at the beginning I was a bit worried that if that would be enough. Also financially, let's be honest, I don't have a bag of money waiting for me every year saying, hey, Sarah, you can just play around in your business, have fun. If only, right? But so I was a little bit worried, but very soon I actually learned that these were exactly the right amount of people, but also the right people. And, because I had so much free time, I could use this time to work on my therapy. I also worked on my business, of course, that's what I did. But the work that was done in therapy was not just during that 1 hour session, right? The real work was actually done afterwards or beforehand, really depending on what we would talk about. And so I was so glad that I had so much time for that. I just want to say that how grateful I am for that because, I've also worked for a boss. So I did this for 3 years and 3 years full time and then 2 years part time and then 2 more years full time. And I didn't like that. And so I soon turned into a freelancer, interim manager. And on the side, I had businesses, right? So I always had this urge to create stuff that were mine. But I also worked for a boss. So I kind of imagined what it would have been like last year if I would have worked for a boss. I think I would have called in sick, probably. That's how bad it was. Yeah, actually, I never really thought about this. I'm thinking about this right now. I probably would. Yes, because it was actually quite difficult. And I'm not saying this to be, oh, wow, you run your business. No. I'm just saying this, as the truth. So just a little bit on what it's like being treated for complex trauma is that it's actually incredibly tiring. It really wore me out. And so, at some point I had to choose specific days where I would choose to work on my healing and other days where I would just ignore and have fun, right? I would ignore the problem and I would just not think about it because it's impossible. And I would just actually live my life. And it was a little bit a mix, of course, of my old world and my new world. And, that was confusing already in itself and everything. So it was a very difficult period, or not difficult, but an interesting period. I don't really want to say that it was difficult, but it was tiring, right? So I was feeling tired in my body. So... And then one of the annoying side effects for me that happened was that I all of a sudden got panic attacks. I never had them in my life. I know that, some people have them already at quite a young age. Luckily, I didn't. So I'm very happy that, I didn't have that before. But I didn't really know what happened. So nobody warned me because everybody, has a different way of, how their body is responding or their mind is responding to therapy. It doesn't have to be trauma therapy. It's not that everybody gets panic attacks. No, but actually the first time it happened to me, I had no idea, but it felt, and I know that I don't think this is actually research, but this is just my experience, right? I'm just talking this from experience. I'm not talking about this from facts or medical journals. No, I don't know, actually. And I honestly don't care for a change because this is just what happened. So it felt like my body was kind of reliving the trauma that was happening and also for it forever to disappear. So this is the way it felt, right? So it felt like I was kind of shedding my trauma. And the funny thing, or the really crazy thing about this is that, once you get your first panic attack, the thing that happens is that you're getting scared of your next panic attack. So you're getting a panic attack because you get a panic attack because you get a panic, so you can kind of go on and on and on and on. So one of the ways that I learned how to cope with panic attacks, and sometimes they still happen. So, for instance, I didn't talk to this about this on the podcast, but in the US, I did have a lot of panic attacks. It was very annoying, of course, because I was traveling, but because I was all the time in different spaces, I was feeling unsafe. So travel for me is not really a goal. I didn't really say this publicly yet, but it is. It is. So it isn't actually. So for me, if I'm seeing someone, going someplace, very nice beach or whatever, okay, yes, a beach I can handle. But for instance, one thing that I really want to do, and it was a gift to my husband, was I want to go to Disneyland, Paris. And I gave this gift to him, and then we would go to the US, and then we would book for the fall. And then after the US, I said, yeah, well, I'm not really sure if I want to do that. Obviously, I have to give another gift, or it's going to be redeemed at another time. But so travel to me feels very unsafe. And I want to feel safer before I'm going to do that, right? So yes, I'm also kind of avoiding the panic attacks. But what I'm also doing is that I'm coping with it. So, of course, one of the things that really helped me is meditation. And I was just looking at the time. It's already 21 minutes that I'm talking about this. Meditation. And what else did I want to say? So I have this very interesting visualization that I'm kind of lighting up the room where I'm in, or the space that I'm in. And that really helps me as well. So if you want to know a little bit more about that, just message me. I'm not going to go too deep into that. And, with these advices, I think the thing is that you just have to find what works best for you. A book that I've read, by the way, I didn't spoke about that in the post, is Happy Days by Gabby Bernstein. It's a very good book. She talks about how she actually worked on her complex trauma. And there's very nice tips and advice in there. And she's just a great writer. So it's a very easy read. A lot of practical tips. Not all of them applied to me, of course, but it's nice to have kind of a backlog, and it's right here behind me in my book case. To sometimes look back at, let's see how she handled this. So the strange thing that I want to share with you lastly is that I actually never had any panic in my business. And so my business was actually the part where I was feeling completely secure and safe. And the reason why that is, the business that I have now, right? So when I was an interim manager, it was a little bit like working for a boss, right? Because I was hired, but now I'm actually creating stuff and people are joining, right? That's a little bit a different dynamic. And so I was feeling completely secure and safe with what I did. And because I built it and it was completely in my control and on my terms. And looking back, it's more and more in my control. So if I'm looking back at last year, I'm completely different in my business right now than I was last year or 1.5 years ago. Because, more and more I'm learning to feel in my life, but also in my business. So feeling, what do I actually really, really want? And this... this sounds so easy, right? But, if you recognize this, in one way or another, it's actually not. It's not easy to learn how to feel if that's something you haven't done for the past 36 or 37 years, or 23 years, or 45 years, or 60 years. So this takes practice, obviously. And so for me, therapy currently consists of going once every 2 weeks. So it's not every week anymore. I'm doing a lot of meditation. That helps me a lot. Gratitude, exercise, being happy with what I have. It's a very powerful tool, which I'm already using for 1.5 years now. Different coping techniques that work for me to recognize triggers early and handling them if I'm too late. And really having the business I have now has actually allowed me to heal in a way that fit my journey. And because I have no one I need to report to, I have actually nothing to worry about. And that's something that I really want. So, of course, I would love to travel very soon, and I would like to have fun with that, right? But I just need a little bit more time. It's just something that I'm feeling. There we go again. Something that I'm feeling that I should do right now. And so this is very new to me. And I actually believe that, and I don't want to call anyone out, but I do believe that there's so many people not really feeling what they really, really want. And so it feels a little bit like, so for instance, if I'm saying I'm afraid to travel, or I don't want to travel at this point because I just feel like I shouldn't do that, it feels a little bit like I'm losing, right? Like I'm a loser. But I know I'm not. And it's actually more powerful to say, I don't want this, and this is just going to be it. And and I'm not saying that you should be a bitch about it, or you should be having all these boundaries and everything, because I didn't really have those. But it was just a little bit more feeling, allowing it, surrendering also to, the fact that this has just happened. Of course, I was angry when I first got, the diagnosis. I was like, oh, could this happen to me? And, I thought I work so hard, of course I got those feelings, right? I'm a human being too. Yeah, but that's not a thing. So the biggest realization for me was that that feeling in my life. So first in my personal life, and in my business, has really, really helped me. So I was taught to pretend I liked things. And in this process of therapy, I had to really unlearn all of that. And so I did that too for my own business, of course, because I could. And that's the thing. And it was so nice because it was something like a parallel process, because I had, one, I had my therapy going on, and two, I was building my business. I was literally building my business. So it's kind of like building a road, building a business, or building a building, strong foundation and everything, but or growing a tree, it's an analogy I like to use, but let's say building a road. And I would, during that therapy, every week I would kind of be able to nudge a little bit in a different direction. And I did. And I know that that's why my clients love me, because I'm always evolving, and I will always evolve. And I'm always learning new things to find the exact right formula. And so... if I'm just looking at my business, from a bird's eye view, I think that's why clients are interested in me, because they know, oh yeah, she's been through that. She knows a little bit, what it's like, maybe to have the same thing as I have, or to have a certain diagnosis in the mental health space. So she understands me. And I know that some of my clients actually do choose me because of that. And I love that, because they trust me. And it's, I've also worked with coaches myself, of course. I'm working with a few now, and I've worked with a few coaches who are kind of that tough love coaching, and really calling people out and creating actually an unsafe space, and probably unbeknownst, right? Because they didn't know what it, or they didn't really experience something like this personally or whatever. I don't really know. I have no idea why they did that, and that's something that I really decided, I don't want that. So if a client comes to me and says, yes, I want to work with you because you show me tough love, actually I'm always a little bit afraid, because I don't want to be that. I want you to grow from a very safe position and a safe foundation. I'm not pushing you in my diagnosis or whatever, don't worry, but it's just something that I find very important. So also my big business course, which I created in March 2022, was already very much about that. So it's funny how that works, right? So that you already kind of know what's happening, or kind of know what you need or what your clients need. But it was also already very much about that. So from, feeling very confident and feeling very you can build a thriving business, or a business that really works very well for you. So I unlearned to do sales calls, to create funnels, to cold DM people. I did some ads, but I thought, okay, no, this is not going to work. And, I have too much experience actually to know that this doesn't work for my kind of business and also my clients' kinds of business. So, yeah, it was not serving me. So actually now, and it's still evolving and it's not a linear process, my coaching business is actually exactly what I want it to be, and something that fits my needs and my mental health perfectly. And because of that, my clients are able to thrive or reach their goals or succeed within what they want, right? So I believe, especially as a coach, that you should really have these things, or at least work on these things when you're working with people, because, but everybody's working with people, right? So I don't think it's just coaches. People really feel it if something's off. People are not stupid. And so, if you clean this up, let's say, or work on this, or discover this, or I'm always calling this an adventure, because I like to make it fun, of course, because that's what I learned. It's still there. But, it's a very interesting path. And I know that, I actually don't know, but I hope that, if I'm looking back at this episode, maybe in 1.5 years, because now it's a little bit longer than 1.5 years that I'm coaching, what I would look at, how I would look at my business then. So it's always changing, and that's also okay. And that's also one of the biggest lessons I'm telling my clients: you're never done. So thank you so much for listening. We're not going to do questions because it's already 31 minutes. Wow, I'm so sorry that it took so long. But this is the time that I needed to express, with all the details and everything that I wanted to share with you. And, for it to be a nuanced story, because it's not just that I'm saying, oh, yay, I had a diagnosis and this is how I worked on it. No, I could have done that, but that's not me anymore. Or has actually never been, but that's just not me. So I hope you've enjoyed this, because this was quite a personal episode. I would really appreciate it, if it has in some way touched you. I would love to receive a message from you. You can message me on Instagram or LinkedIn. You can find all the links in the description. So this was just my personal experience, my recap of 1.5 years of parallel going, coaching people and also going into therapy, and how that actually can really work very well. And I also want to take this opportunity to thank my friends and family and clients who have really supported me throughout this journey. Thank you so much for listening, and talk to you next week. Thank you for listening to Big Business with Sarah. If you've enjoyed today's episode, leave a 5-star review and hit subscribe. If you're ready for your next step in business, you can find out how to work with me in the show notes. Do not forget to submit your coaching question for one of my next episodes. Have a happy day.